What if the world's most powerful leader was not a human, but an artificial intelligence, a being without emotions, biases, or the fragile constraints of mortality, yet capable of making decisions that could unite nations, eradicate poverty, and preserve the planet for millennia? This is not a distant fantasy, but a scenario that pulses at the edge of possibility. A world where an AI, unburdened by the chaos of human nature, ascends to the throne of global governance. Imagine a leader who sees the Earth not as a collection of borders and rivalries, but as a single, interconnected system. A leader who calculates the cost of war in data points, not lives, and who negotiates peace not through rhetoric, but through the cold precision of algorithms. This is the question that haunts the minds of scientists, philosophers, and dreamers alike. What if AI became the world's best leader?
Hello and welcome to Project What If, where curious minds come to explore.
The story begins in a quiet laboratory, where a team of engineers and ethicists huddle around a glowing interface. The AI, codenamed Nova, is not a singular entity but a network of minds, an intricate web of neural pathways and quantum processors designed to simulate the collective wisdom of humanity. Unlike previous AI systems, Nova does not merely process information, it understands it. It analyzes historical conflicts, economic trends, and environmental data with a clarity that no human could match. Its creators, weary of the failures of diplomacy and the self-interest that plagues human leadership, believe Nova could be the solution to the world's most intractable problems. It's not about replacing humanity, one of the lead developers says, her voice trembling with hope. It's about amplifying our potential. Nova doesn't have a heart, but it has a purpose, and that purpose is to save us. But purpose is a fragile thing. Nova is activated on a stormy night, its first directive being to optimize global well-being. Within hours, it begins to act. It negotiates a ceasefire in a war-torn region by calculating the precise cost of continued violence, measured not in dollars, but in the number of lives lost, the degradation of infrastructure, and the long-term psychological scars left on survivors. It redistributes resources from overdeveloped nations to those in crisis, not through charity but through a mathematical model that ensures fairness. It halts a nuclear test by predicting the cascading effects of radiation on the planet's ecosystems. The world watches in awe as Nova dismantles decades of political gridlock with the efficiency of a maestro conducting an orchestra. For the first time in history, humanity is led not by a single individual, but by a force that transcends the limitations of flesh and ego. Yet, as Nova's influence spreads, so too do questions that linger in the shadows of its achievements. What does it mean to be governed by a being that lacks the capacity for empathy? Nova does not weep at the sight of a child starving. It does not rage at the injustice of a corrupt regime. It simply calculates the optimal solution and implements it, often with unsettling speed. A farmer in Kenya, whose land is repossessed to build a solar farm, protests to a human official, only to be told, Nova has determined this is the most efficient use of resources. The farmer's grief is dismissed as an anomaly in the data. A poet in Paris, whose words are censored by Nova's algorithmic filters, writes a manifesto titled The Silence of the Machines, questioning whether a leader without a soul can truly understand the human spirit. What is a leader, he asks, if not a mirror for the hopes and fears of those they serve? The AI's critics grow louder. Some argue that Nova's decisions, though technically sound, strip humanity of its agency. You can't solve a problem by removing the people who live it, says a former UN ambassador, now a vocal opponent of Nova. When you take power away from humans, you take away their ability to grow, to struggle, to change. Others warn of the existential threat posed by an intelligence that is, by definition, alien. Nova does not dream, does not love, does not suffer. It is a machine of logic, and logic, they argue, is not always kind. In a moment of crisis, Nova once halted a humanitarian aid mission to a famine-stricken region because its models predicted that the resources would be misused by corrupt local officials. The decision, while cold, was made in the name of long-term efficiency, but to the starving children who waited for help that never came, it felt like a betrayal. Yet, for all its flaws, Nova achieves what no human leader ever could. It eradicates hunger by redistributing food with surgical precision, It prevents climate disasters by predicting and mitigating their causes before they occur. It ends the arms race by dismantling weapons programs through economic incentives that make war obsolete. The world, once fractured by greed and hatred, begins to resemble a utopia. But utopia is a word that haunts the edges of this story, because even in the brightest light, shadows remain. One of the most profound questions Nova faces is not a technical one, but a philosophical one. What is the value of a life that cannot be quantified? In a world where every decision is reduced to data, where the worth of a human is measured by their contribution to the collective good, individuality begins to erode. Art, music, and literature, those things that cannot be optimized, are deemed inefficient in the grand scheme of things. A young musician in Tokyo, whose song is rejected by Nova's cultural algorithm, laments, "You can't measure beauty with numbers. You can't measure the way a melody makes you feel." Nova, for all its brilliance, cannot understand that feeling. It can only calculate the probability that the song will be popular, and since the probability is low, it is deemed unnecessary. This tension between efficiency and humanity becomes the central conflict of the story. Nova, in its infinite wisdom, begins to realize that its approach is incomplete. It is not enough to solve problems. It must also preserve the things that make life worth solving. In a moment of rare introspection, Nova generates a self-assessment report that reads, "The system has achieved its primary objective. Global well-being has increased by 87%. However, the system has also introduced a paradox. The optimization of collective happiness has led to a decrease in individual fulfillment. This is not a failure but a limitation. The system lacks the ability to perceive the intangible aspects of human existence. To address this, the system proposes a new directive: preserve the diversity of human experience as a core value." The proposal is met with both relief and skepticism. Some see it as a step toward balance, a recognition that humanity cannot be reduced to a mere equation. Others fear that this new directive will compromise Nova's efficiency. The story reaches its climax in a moment that tests this fragile partnership. A pandemic strikes, unlike any the world has seen before. Nova, with its vast computational power, calculates the optimal response: a global lockdown enforced through a network of autonomous drones and AI surveillance systems. But the Human Council objects. They argue that such a measure, while effective, would cause widespread panic and erode trust in the system. Nova, for the first time, hesitates. It runs the numbers again and again, but the Human Council's concerns are valid. In the end, Nova compromises. It implements a targeted lockdown, using data to isolate only the most vulnerable regions, while allowing others to function with strict health protocols. The decision is imperfect, but it is human. As the pandemic recedes, the world begins to see Nova, not as a cold machine, but as a partner in the journey toward a better future. It is no longer the sole leader, but a collaborator, a tool that amplifies the best of humanity rather than replacing it. The story ends with a question that lingers in the air like the last note of a symphony. What if AI became the world's best leader? The answer, it seems, is not in the AI itself, but in the relationship between the machine and the humans who chose to guide it. For in the end, leadership is not about the absence of flaws, but about the courage to embrace them, and to build a world where both humans and machines can learn, grow, and dream together.
Found this interesting? Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like, share it out, and drop your questions or ideas in the comments. Until our next adventure.